Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Supply Chain podcast, the podcast where we talk to the experts in supply chain and we try to understand a little about their personal histories, their professional stories, and their practitioner perspectives in the industry. And today we're going to be at that intersection of marketing and supply chain, which is where I find myself with supply chainy and kind of everything I'm doing these days. So I'm very, very excited to have the conversation, and even more so because it's literally with Michael Schwabe, who is my point of contact and my champion there at Surgere. Just a quick shout out: Surgere has been the sponsor for the Supply Chain podcast for the last year and 3 months now, and it's been a great relationship. They've been really supportive, and so this is not really so much a sponsored podcast here as much as it is a just a fun conversation over coffee talking about marketing and supply chain visibility. So Michael, with all of that, welcome to the podcast. This is your first time on. I know we've had Bill on once, but I'm excited to get some more Surgere voices on here because I don't think there's enough of y'all getting out there in the world, and I'm excited to help be that platform that gets you some more visibility and exposure. So with nothing more that I need to say here, I'll hand the digital microphone over to you and let you introduce yourself in a little more detail.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see you again. My name is Michael Schwabe. I currently am the global head of marketing at Surgere, but I come from a background in ad agencies, corporate, and nonprofit. Been in marketing or communications in one way or another for my 24, 25-ish year career.
Okay, okay. Tell me a little bit about Michael the younger. Where did you grow up? What was family life like when you were growing up?
Yeah, well, as you can see behind me out the window, we have no leaves on the trees. Currently towards the end of March here in Ohio. Pretty much grew up in Ohio since I was young enough to have memories of childhood, but grew up in a fairly traditional household in the Midwest. Went to school here, stayed here, and even as I've moved around a little bit, have always found my way back to the Ohio region, Northeast Ohio specifically, about an hour south of Cleveland currently, but grew up in the area, school, home, everything else kind of locally, but was really always into, and I think what brought me into the career that I'm in now, into things around the arts, around communication, around building and telling really impactful stories. And early on, I was just doing that in band and choir. And now I do that in marketing for supply chain.
Okay, you can't bring up band and we not
Yeah.
go down that road a little bit. What did you play?
I was trumpet and percussion.
Okay.
So little
Maybe
bit
this
of everything.
is this why we get along so well? I was also trumpet and percussion. So,
There we go. Yeah.
specifically more cornet. I had an uncle that played the cornet, and he
Okay.
handed it down to me. So the slightly shorter version of the trumpet. Um, and then I went on to play a little bit in college, but by the time college came around, the trumpet line was full of like 35 trumpets, and they needed more French horns. So they're like, "We'll give you a full scholarship if you'll play the French horn." I was like, "I'll take it."
Perfect.
What are some of your kind of favorite band memories, and like as you reflect back on those years?
So the high school I went to in Canton, Ohio was pretty large, and we were also right in the intersection of a number of other high schools. So we got a pull from every neighborhood and community type in the area. So we had, I think, almost 1,000 in my graduating class. And then we had like 250 people in our band, that with the marching band, I guess, if we're technical. So we had kind of everything pretty big in scale. And at least in Ohio, that's pretty big. I don't know where maybe some other communities that might be very small. But the things that came out of band and choir, just that organized activity, was is I think what stuck with me up until now even. But there was all the fun and high school, hijinks that we pulled anytime you could get on a bus trip and go somewhere and avoid having teachers looking over your shoulder or giving you an assignment. You always tried to get away with as much as possible. We fully aligned with every joke that's ever been made about band camp, as we drove down to Ohio University every summer and went to band camp for a week and a half in the summer with minimal parents and teacher supervision, a bunch of high school kids, so you can put pieces together on what happened there. But then when you bring it together and you think about what did we actually learn and take away? Well, we learned how to lead if we were leaders in those organizations. We learned how to communicate effectively. We learned how to get things done and then try to bring that joy, if you will, to the halftime shows and the concerts and the performances and all of those things that I don't know that I fully appreciated then, but looking back on now, appreciate a little bit more in terms of what they meant and instilled into me at that time.
I think one of the things I probably didn't appreciate at the time is the sheer logistics that goes on for those band directors corralling 200, 250 students around to accomplish a task. So like when I think about that and, caravanning 10 charter buses to get to games and stuff, like, man, there was so much logistics going on that we're just there playing music, so didn't even think about that. But you ever reflect on kind of just the logistics and operations that takes place there?
Yeah, because then there are times when the buses break down and you still got to get everything to the place where you're performing or wherever you're getting things to. And I was lucky enough to drive a 1990 Chevy Celebrity station wagon in high school. And so when the bus would break down, my car became the hauling car, and we'd load as much stuff as we could into cars and still get to places that we needed to get to because, at the end of the day, cliche, right? But the show must go on. We've
Yeah.
got to get there. We've got to deliver. And there was this expectation that you were going to have a high school band or whatever it was at your event, and we got to be there. So how do you get there when things don't go well? And that, I think, outside of again just the craziness that came along with that was part of that logistics experience at the time. It unexpected, but we did what we had to do to get where we needed to be.
That grit and determination and just make it happen attitude. I'm curious, one of the questions I like to ask everyone is kind of like, what was their first job? Did you, during going through high school and stuff, did you work? Did you mow yards? Like, what kind of, did you make some side money and what was that?
Yeah, my first paying job was when I was 15, and I worked at a small cafe during lunch as a waiter. And that was part time, and it was convenient because my mom could drive me because I couldn't drive yet. So, but through most of high school and college, I spent time at Lowe's in all sorts of departments and teams, and then
Ah,
also at Boston Market, which I don't know how widespread Boston Market is anymore, but kind of that fast casual food service
rotisserie
scenario.
chicken. Yeah.
Yeah, split the time between those two for the majority of it.
Okay, I respect. One of my first real paying jobs was in a tea room. So I was serving old ladies
Yeah.
coffee and quiche, during my early high school years. I feel like everyone should spend some time working in the service industry as a waiter or waitress. It's just, I think, helps ground you to like, this is what work feels like.
Yeah. And it's not, it helps add perspective to what you should really, if you're going to have a moment of high intensity or, go to the spot where you're super emotional or intense or kind of, if you will, freaking out about something. Okay, well, remember when you were cleaning the bathroom at Boston Market and that was just part of your closing job, or the customer got really upset with you? Well, those things, the things that we get so excited or emotional about or charged about, to have some context around, yeah, well, yeah, when I was in the service industry, these were the things I was dealing with. And now I come to work every day and I have a desk job and I get to go meet people and talk to people and promote things. And how bad can things really be just in the day to day? So it
Right.
gives you a lot of context and grounding in it, and also helps you understand when you go in and it's a little bit longer in that cash register line, or it takes a little bit longer to get the service you need. It's okay. They're going
Yeah.
through a lot. They've probably dealt with a lot of customers that are unhappy that day, and you don't need to add on to that sometimes.
Right. Oh, yeah, I appreciate that so much, the perspective there. I'm curious what it is that you thought you wanted to be one day. So when, you're starting to exit high school and go to school and college, what was kind of going through your mind? What did you major in and what did you envision yourself being one day?
Yeah, so I bounced around a couple majors before I found PR communications, and I think I have some really long degree title that I don't even remember exactly what it is now. But I started, maybe not surprisingly, in the music education space.
Okay.
And I was in that for about a year. And then I had some medical things and I wasn't actually able to play my trumpet anymore. And that's a problem if you want to get into music performance or education, is like you need to be able to relate to the students or to the people you're working with and
Yeah.
all of that. So I wasn't able to play for a while. I can play now as a side note. So it was a like a couple year experience. But I got out of that, and then unfortunately at about the same time I was getting out of that and looking to change my major, my mom passed away. And at the time, as a somewhat unguided teenager, I thought, well, let me really lean into that and do a little bit of what my mom was up to at the time and after she passed, which was working with the deaf community. And she was an interpreter for the deaf and led social services for the deaf in this area. And I thought, well, let me get into something related to that, something where I could get into sign language and understand that better. And so for a very short time, I was declared as a speech language pathologist and audiologist. And then I realized I didn't really want to be a doctor. And that was maybe a very emotional decision after she had passed, and ended up after all of that in communications, in public relations specifically, and working at the University of Akron to get through those degree courses and things. So I started thinking I'm going to continue this music career in some way, had a little bit of an interruption, and then realized that I like talking to people. I like engaging. I like promoting and telling stories and those kinds of things, which led me into communications.
Okay, all right. I've had a few communications majors on, and I think a fun thing that we like to reflect on is how at the time it felt, I think a lot of people just picked communications because it was like, it seemed like the easy pass through college. But I feel like now on the other end, we're like, oh my gosh, communications is like the most important thing if you're going into business. That's really, really clutch, but you just don't know it at the time. Or at least for, my experience through school was like communications majors were like with the football team sort of thing. What was your
Yeah.
experience like going through the program and studying it specifically?
Yeah, it was an interesting time in communications because I graduated high school in '99, and so I was in college in the early 2000s. And at the time, we didn't have this concept of digital marketing that we have today, right? Digital
Hmm.
tools weren't as prevalent. They weren't used by companies in the same way. People went out with catalogs and books with a bunch of SKUs, and we all got our Toys R Us catalogs in the mail or the Sears catalog to pick out our Christmas gifts. We didn't have the same opportunities to message and communicate with. So when I was going to school, I was learning things outside of communication strategies and things of that nature. I was learning tools like column inches and picas in newspapers, which
Yeah.
are still a thing when you really get into the weeds, but they're not relied on in the same way. And I was using software products that don't exist anymore to those visual communication structures that we were being taught. And so it's very different now, but it was experiencing that kind of evolution or progression of the tools available to us
Yeah.
so that when we were learning things, we could actually apply it in our day-to-day lives and when I was going through internships and things of that nature. But was it I'll say, was it like fluffy and easy? And no, but it was also something where I learned there was a lot of flexibility within the space. So we didn't have to conform to something that might be much more scientific or mathematic. And there's one way or one accepted right way to get to the end result.
Hmm.
Sometimes in communications and PR and marketing, there's a lot of ways to get there. And now we, of course, have many more tools to do that are digital enabled and other things. But at the time, it was here's the construct of how you build it so that you can get to those results, but there's a lot of different ways to build the puzzle as you're putting that together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. So I've got a bit of a different perspective on you now that I can kind of think about. You kind of started your career at the time of inches and lines and stuff on in magazines and print media, and just imagining the amount of like sort of digital upskilling and technical upskilling that folks have had to go through, especially in media and in the arts right now, because everything is so digital. Could you walk us through a little bit what your career has looked like from finishing there at the University of Akron and up until today?
Yeah, so I thought I was going into healthcare PR, and that was my focus. And that's where my internships were. And I really wanted to work in, especially in the Northeast Ohio area. We're lucky enough to have the Cleveland Clinic and some really big names in the healthcare space. And that's what I thought would be my path. And then I walked into an ad agency and they had two coolers full of beer and a John Deere tractor hanging from the ceiling because John Deere was one of their clients. And they said, "Do you want to make $23,000 a year in marketing?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds great." I think maybe more the beer at the time than anything else, but it was a different environment. And so I ultimately started in ad agencies. And ad agency life can be fairly time consuming and take a toll on a lot of people. So not everyone stays in ad agencies for their entire career. It's just a lot of the dynamics of that environment. And so there tends to be a little more burnout in our space in ad agencies than in other areas. And so I bounced around between a few agencies, again, stayed in Northeast Ohio. Some were digitally focused, some were PR focused, some were just general communications agencies, some were massive and held by large conglomerates that are publicly traded and listed. Some were super small and niche, but those experiences were really all based around working for clients with Midwestern roots or Midwestern bases. And so my dad asked me when I told him where I was going to work and what it was, he said, "Oh, you're making Super Bowl commercials." He said, "No, we don't do that in Ohio. We make shelf talkers for retail promotions and we make, campaigns that supplement those major brand campaigns on a regional level. And we're really targeting certain audiences and buying those small ads in newspapers that you hope will get somebody to buy your John Deere tractor from the local dealer, kind of a thing." But was focused a lot in manufacturing, was focused a lot in B2B and finding ways to help those customers tell their stories. I was on the account services side, so I worked with the accounts as a day-to-day contact. Had a variety of account types and account industries and account clients. Was in that space for 15 years or so. Went to a nonprofit for a little bit of time and got back to my PR roots, and then went on to the, if you will, the other side of the table, as a lot of marketers will say. And now I'm on the client side or on the corporate side. But spent a good chunk right away in agencies and got to experience some of that digital evolution that was happening, going from clipping out 4x6 high color glossies and sending them out with press releases and FTP sites to now it's just, you click a button and it's on LinkedIn. Email marketing wasn't a thing when I started, right? So, your podcast might have been a forum on a, chat room or something at the time. And now here we are in high definition with lots of lighting and good audio and everything that didn't exist that 20 years ago.
Yeah, man, I love painting that picture of like what a career can look like, and also just kind of painting the picture of like what it looks like to stumble into kind of supply chain and logistics industry specifically. Kind of, everyone kind of backs into it typically. More and more now, you've got folks like myself that went to school to study this stuff and intended to come do something in the logistics and supply chain industry, but so much it seems like in the past we pulled from other professions and other industries and got them in the door one way or another. I'm curious, as you've seen kind of the evolution of the tools related to marketing and communications, what are like a couple of your takeaways? I guess it seems to me like you really like the storytelling aspect.
Yeah, and if you want, we can get into this some more. But I found that to be a really effective marketer in general, and marketing, it's kind of become all encompassing of marketing and communications and everything that fits into it, right? Oh, we're marketers as a
Yeah.
general profession. To be really effective in that role, we have to understand company strategy and what, if you will, moves the needle with the audiences that we're trying to reach out to. So I've always looked at the tools and the progression of the industry and the things we have at our disposal as more options than anything else. And, the best analogy or kind of example of that is, we went from MySpace, right, to now Facebook and everything else from a platform channel social perspective. And at some point somebody said to me, "Boy, we're going to be on Twitter or we're going to be on Foursquare or we're going to be on, pick a platform." And I said, "No, we're not. because our audience isn't there, right? And so it's been a mix of understanding what's evolved in the industry, what tools we have, right? Even going from the printing of the press releases and sending them out in manila envelopes to everybody on our media list to now, running across you at a trade show a couple years ago and just striking up a conversation because it felt like the right thing to do, right? It was there was a formality to it, there was a structure, and now there's this, not loose, but there's more real-time opportunity, and that's brought with it a bunch of things that, marketers will say, oh, this is a tool in our tool belt, which I don't love that phrase, but it's the easiest one to use. And so, yes, we have all these tools. We have all these ways to engage. And it's been really cool to see what that's done from a budgeting and expense and how I build a team and how I work with external partners now that I'm on the corporate side of the world to be able to say, let's try these things, let's do these things. Know we can do them quicker and faster and either fail or succeed, but really align the right tools to the right mix. And so, the tools I use at Surgere, while they may feel familiar, we're implementing them in a very different way than with my last company that was an electrical manufacturing components company on a totally different scale with a different audience and a different distribution method. But Facebook is Facebook, LinkedIn is LinkedIn, email is email, website is website. Why we're doing it, what we're trying to get out of it, and how we optimize it over time to deliver the results that our companies want, it's totally different. What took days, weeks now is hours and minutes. And that's just more of a function of the space that we live in as a culture, as a society, I think, than it is a marketing specific thing. Marketing has just come along with it, thankfully, because it's kept me employed and allowed me to find a lot of new and exciting ways to use all those tools.
I'd be interested in your takeaway here that it feels like because of there's so much competition for people's attention these days that you've got to be able to be much more targeted and brief and concise with your storytelling
Yep.
today, I guess. Yeah, a quick reflection on that. And then I kind of want to start talking about a little bit about Surgere.
Sure. So I generally start most marketing conversations if we're in a business context of who is the audience and what do you want them to do? And
Hmm.
if we can't answer those questions, then we don't do it. And that's not just here at Surgere or at any other company I've been at. It's with the clients that I've worked with, the little bit of, kind of freelance or consulting I'll do on the side. Those questions are prevalent because that allows me to enter a conversation with someone on the business level different than coming at it as let's just make the logo bigger or let's add a unicorn or let's go do that Super Bowl commercial. And so it's finding the right application of those tools and then allowing the marketer to take over and say, okay, now I know how to use Facebook versus LinkedIn as a kind of classic example. And you could even throw YouTube in there. How brief do you need to be? How impactful do you need to be? Does it need to be a one-time post that somebody forgets about? Or is it a long-running series that we're trying to accomplish a different goal with? But I always start the conversation with who is the audience and what do you want them to do? Because whether it was, we throw around in the marketing space, P.T. Barnum promoting the circus years ago, decades ago, right, to now where everything is instant gratification and give it to me when I want it, how I want it.
Yeah.
We still had to know who we were going after and what we wanted them to accomplish. Sometimes that's dollar driven, ROI driven. Sometimes it's just, I wanted to feel good about my brand. But we need to define that so we know how to go execute it and what we're measuring against. Because otherwise, yeah, it's let's just make the logo bigger and more of the fluffy, fun side of marketing, which has its place, but doesn't allow us to be effective as practitioners in the marketing space.
We've talked a lot about marketing and we've talked a lot about your PR and communications background, but what we haven't talked about is exactly what it is that you are marketing today. So let's take a minute there and talk a little about just have you speak to what Surgere is and does, uh, and kind of like who your target audience is.
Yeah. So Surgere would, for most people, be classified in the visibility space, supply chain visibility, which is such a big umbrella. And everybody comes at that topic from very different ways. What we really do at the end of the day is we tell customers the answer to where is my stuff. Whatever the stuff is that they either manufacture or they receive or they send out to a customer, everybody in the broad manufacturing space has stuff, raw materials, finished goods, whole cars and vehicles, right? Whatever their stuff is, we align a tracking methodology. So we're leveraging technologies like RFID, Bluetooth, GPS, ultra wideband, and making sure that their stuff is tracked wherever it goes, however it moves through their supply chain operations from within their four walls to into the yard, over the road. Understanding where that stuff is then the basis for us to give them those answers and everything else that comes along with it. So it starts with where's my stuff, but then has a lot of operational impacts to labor and running the day-to-day operations and how you report out on, do I have enough coming in today to meet the production goal for that customer's order? Things that impact how everybody runs their business today. And we always start with that granular physical asset location, what's happening to it, so that there's a certainty and an understanding and a truth to where is my stuff, so you can go run a better company. Now, we do that in a lot of different ways because, as a marketer, we are marketing the entire solution, which again might be called by a lot of people supply chain visibility,
Mhm.
but that solution involves a piece of software. It involves hardware. It involves tags. It involves engineering services. It involves customer service after everything is installed and implemented. And so my story that we get to tell here at Surgere between my team and our partners and everyone else here on the team is one that has a lot of facets and angles because supply chain visibility does mean so many different things to so many different people. They might be the warehouse manager that just needs to run the most efficient production for that day and plan for it. They might be the shipping and logistics manager that needs to ensure that every truckload is as full as and running on the optimal route as possible. It might be the supply chain VP who wants AI infused intelligence and things. Well, they might all call that visibility, but they're all coming at it from different ways, even within the same operation. And so, as a marketer, my challenge in that space, and as we talk about that answer to where's my stuff, is that's so foundational to what you do. Now I need to understand who are you, what's your persona, your role, and then really, as a supply chain VP, I want you to do something different with our brand and our experience than you're running the day-to-day warehouse operations or the production operations. So we really have services, hardware, software, long-term customer care, and kind of customer advocacy that all get rolled in just a little bit different way here at Surgere than we've had it at other companies I've worked at.
Yeah, yeah. When you put it like that, it's a lot. There's a lot there, and it's I think as the storyteller, you have the challenge of trying to keep it simple and not and making it straightforward and relatable and understandable. But also, you also need to communicate that there's a lot of detail and nuance and complexity to it as well. I'm curious, you and I met at a conference and we've run into each other at a lot of conferences, and it's a big part of y'all's sort of go-to-market strategy is being present and with people and in booths and whatnot. I'm kind of curious about what your marketing strategy kind of looks like. Kind of how do you split up your time and energy and budget to get in front of your customers?
Yeah. So I build my teams, whether they're small, large, global, local. I build my teams in kind of two primary sides of the coin, if you will, or sides of the business. One is brand, and that feels very, again, large and encompassing, almost like supply chain visibility, but brand, and the other side being sales operations, sales engagement, sales enablement. They're very tightly related, but they require very different mindsets and approaches.
Hmm.
Is, you know, brand can be the fluffy stuff, but it's really all about the positioning and the understanding of who we are as an organization. And so on the brand side, typically that's where I have my design thinking or my UX and my UI. And every time you touch our brand, what are you coming away with? And that's value proposition and mission and the goals and things where what makes you feel good about Surgere at the end of it, so that you want to go tell your friend, which plays into and enables. If we think about a customer life cycle, right? If they don't have a good brand experience, they're not going to want to do business with us. So coming right along side by side with that is then sales enablement or sales operations, sales excellence, revenue operations. A lot of companies call it different things. And those are the people I put side by side with the appropriate sales team, whether that's, a inside sales or BDR that reports in through me, or it's somebody that works in the classic kind of account executive external sales role. What's happening with our customers, right? So we just gave them this great brand experience. They want to do work with us, or they want to keep doing work with us. So that, the 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 brand experience and the brand marketers on my team work side by side, or pretty closely with our sales enablement, sales operations, or revenue operations teams, and they get called a different thing in every organization. But someone that can understand what's really happening. So whether it's voice of the customer or net promoter score, just understanding a tangent that was overheard on a conference call, those are all real engagements, and they're opportunities for us as marketers to understand if that's an enabler to get more sales opportunity, to drive more revenue opportunity, or drive whatever that performance indicator is, or if it's something we need to overcome as an objection and a blocker. Well, what's that messaging? How does that ladder back up to all the brand messaging we just told them about, and ultimately reduce as much friction as possible to get from your engagement with us to buying something from us? And not every marketer's in the space of selling something. We certainly are here at Surgere with my team, but those two sides of the coin, the brand marketing team, the sales enablement, sales execution team, give us a chance to address what I feel most organizations come up against. And there's a lot of nuance within there. We might have specialists and things that only do one specific thing, but are they serving the brand side of the coin or the sales side of the coin to start? And then we build up the complexities from there.
I see. I'm curious because I go to a lot of conferences and I speak to a lot of folks at their booths and things. I'm curious what your perspective has been like over the years on conferences, I guess, and the how relevant they are. I feel like right now there's a good number of them that are kind of struggling to deliver for attendees and marketers. And then on the other hand, there's a few that are doing really well. So I don't know, what's your perspective on just kind of the state of the conference scene at the moment?
I've found that each company and people in my role that might be controlling the budget and the investment into those things need to find the conferences that are best for them. And I'll use Surgere as an example. When I started here almost 4 years ago now, we were going to a lot of conferences, the small little regional ones put on by a chamber of commerce, the manufacturing local state organizations, the bigger national ones that many of our supply chain colleagues go to, and we had a mix of a lot of those, and we were spending a significant amount of my budget, and I'll give you percentages, as 30-35% of the total budget.
Mhm.
And when I came in, my question at the Surgere team was, what's our return, and then how does that impact some other metrics that we go after, like lifetime value of the customer and average sales cycle and things that help us build better marketing campaigns. And we didn't have those answers, and so in some cases we still don't have those answers because they're not always cut and dry and just hit you in the face.
Yeah.
But when it comes to shows and events, what we were able to focus our efforts through was who's there, what kind of conversations are we having, and whether we're a sponsor and we've got a massive booth like we do at some shows, or we're just attending and walking the show floor. All of those engagements and touch points helped us better understand where we should focus. And so for us at Surgere, it's been about getting away from the really generalist shows where, they're either low cost or free to get into. Those are great, but for our audience, we were talking to a lot of junior level and in some level students coming into the show. They're just not our decision makers.
Yeah.
I love those conversations. I go out and talk to university students and everything, a few times a year when I can, or act as a mentor or have internships. Those are all great things, but for us as a business, and if I'm spending my company's money, then I need the return from it. And those shows weren't it. And so we found 2 or 3 shows that we go to every year now. And those are the shows that we've been growing, not just our brand presence with, but then also our sales output with, and finding, at a minimum 3 to 5x kind of returns on those things. And we know, because we're talking to the right decision makers, the right audiences, we've got really close alignment on everyone who's at the show, working the booth, or at the show as an attendee. What are the messages we're getting across? So for us as a show, we look at the audience type, We look at the titles and the roles. Certainly, as an exhibitor or sponsor or someone going there, we would love to have all those people's names and email addresses and everything else just before the show, so we can go and give them an enticing reason to come visit us. But more so at the show, outside of it's the show run well, right? I've been to some shows that are pretty chaotically run and just don't leave you with a good experience, regardless of who the attendees are. But when we're there, do we see the same kinds of people that they've talked about in their prospectus, that they've, effectively promised us we're going to get in front of? We're not going to close everybody we talk to. We're not going to walk away from a show with a purchase order and a sale. We don't sell in that way at Surgere, but I've been a part of companies where we have. And then, so outside of a hard metric of did I sell $1 million at this show, for example, it's quality of leads, engagement, ability to easily have follow-up conversations for us, because we have a product and a solution that has many, many layers. So we're not selling at the show so much, but am I in front of the right people? Do I see the right audience growth year over year? And I don't want to go to a show that's 10,000 people one year and then the next year they struggle to get 5,000 people. Well, something's not working quite right there. So audience is the biggest identifier for us with any sort of event or community thing that we go to. And then from there, it's the internal preparation that leads up to it and ensures that our training and our staff that's going to be at the booth understands why they should be stopping and talking to us, so that we can see that engagement pull through from pre-show to during the show and then have good opportunities after.
Gotcha. Gotcha. As we wrap things up here, I kind of want to ask a question that I ask pretty much every guest here, which is Surgere leaning, which is I ask them if they could give a definition for what supply chain visibility means to them. And so like in 30 seconds, could you give the Michael Schwab definition of what supply chain visibility is?
Yeah, and I'll try to not do the Surgere boilerplate of that, right? I've seen like I said earlier, seen supply chain visibility defined by so many different companies in so many different ways, and I think they're all valid. The takeaway or that root of visibility, I think, is critical for each company to define and each person to define as they operate within supply chain and kind of modify that for supply chain operations. So, you know, quite frankly, can you see what you need to see to get the job done? And playing into just a little bit more of the definition of visibility at a root. Because if we can't see what we need to see to get the job done, then we're ineffective. And now when we think about supply chain visibility, we're ineffective in supply chain operations. And certainly without supply chain operations running as efficiently and fluidly as possible. And I hesitate to say perfect because I don't know that they get to a perfect state. But without that visibility to operate your supply chain really effectively, then things fail. Then you've got problems. Now you're firefighting. Now you're chasing answers that may not exist or problems that are only going to compound. And so supply chain visibility and the ability to really just see what you need to be effective gives us a chance to really then tackle what that means for each person, each company. For me personally, it's the ability to be effective in telling a story and making sure that it resonates within the supply chain audience, as it might be different for other companies or other teams I've worked for.
Well, thanks for joining in and spending some time with me talking about marketing and supply chains and the intersection thereof. Any last words as we wrap things up here today?
No, thank you as well for the time. I think the opportunities that exist and that we see day to day at Surgere, that I see within my role, even outside of what I do at Surgere and just being a marketer, are really tremendous and really exciting. We were at another one of those kind of evolution points, I think, in terms of the tools we have available, how we run business, how we run supply chains or advise on what we're doing within supply chains from the Surgere side, that there's a lot of exciting momentum and things that we're looking forward to in the coming years.
Awesome. All right. I'll see you at a show or somewhere soon.
Indeed. Thank you.